Hugh McDonnell. We're in Carriff Murphy, the townland of Carriff Murphy. There's a neighbour who went to sea a lot of years back. When he joined the boat, the skipper asked him his name and address, and he said he was John McVeigh, Carriff Murphy. And the skipper asked him what was Murphy's address. So it belonged to the man, as far as I know, in my time was Eddie McAlister. And it was handed down when he died, went to his nephew, Charlie McAlister, who was one of a family of 7 maybe, who lived a few fields across the way here. There's just the one sister left now belonged to that family, Mary McAlister. Oh, just the farming. That McAlister family that I'm talking about, their father was a seaman and married and then bought one farm here 100 years ago. As time went on, they bought in small places, people selling small farms. I think they have about 7 small holdings now. It's just a small hill farm. It's just sheep and cattle, but steep and hard to work. And they sold the car park there to the council back maybe 20 years ago. Well, the pit was done in June time, the end of May, June time, to get as much drying or the turf to get the good weather. And when it was dry, you cut it with a spade. We had to take it down with donkeys and slide cars, or a horse and a slide car, which didn't have wheels, but had wooden shafts which ran to the ground, and you put a wooden spag on that. It's called a spag. And eventually it would have wore off, and you had to replace them. That wooden spag was about 2.5 feet long, and there's a hole through the shaft which went down into the spag, and there was a round ring went over the two to hold them in place. So every so often you would have to put on a new pair of spags because it's hard, stony ground, and it wore it away eventually. But it was hard work, but most of the people had sheep on the hill, and you were able to see the sheep when you were up going to the turf. At that particular time, the sheep would be cut and ready to clip, and before they were clipped, they would roll sometimes. They were itchy, and they got in their back, and they weren't able to get off their back. And the birds would have attacked their eyes and their stomachs, and so when you were at the turf, you were able to see the sheep, work a while in the turf, and come home hungry. Turf was took down by a horse or a donkey, and that slide car that I was describing to you, which didn't have wheels, that ran on the ground. Full spade was 3 men. You could cut with 2, a lame spade. Ann was cutting, and he would cut the turf and he threw it out in the bank, and then you had somebody with a fork which would have lifted it and put it back to get room. You had to keep it spread back. But the full spade was the best. The third man was a holer. When the man that was cutting cut 2 turf, and the holer lifted the 2 and put them out. Okay. It was left it a lot quicker. Well, it wouldn't be, they never really went to 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening. They went maybe when they had the cows seen and curious wee jobs done, a few hours. But they would have had maybe 5, 6 tractor loads to do the winter. That was quite a bit of work, getting that. That was just what I said. There were very few sold turf, it was a lot of work. It had been worked out nearly as dear as coal if you had to buy them, But the fact that we owned the moss and stuff, and we're up seeing the sheep and things, it tied in with your day's work. Worked for a few years with McKillop Brothers, potato merchants, and guarantor for 40 odd. They were grounds and farming. They had their own farm and they grew their own potatoes for it was a boarding school, and they grew their own potatoes for the school and vegetables, and they had their own milk herd, dairy cows, and the students used to come out after school for about an hour and help us to gather the potatoes. And maybe we had about 100 of them out for an hour. And they would have done more in that hour than we would have done a week. But the numbers, put on their football boots and they got us something extra at supper where they were bored and they were isolated, they had nothing miles away from anywhere, and you weren't allowed to leave. John McAlister was a mate of mine for a few years in the Scottish college. He done the same as me.